What's up everyone and welcome back to the World History Channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. The story of Feodor Vassilyev, a man who, in the 1700s, had 22 twins. One of the most prolific fathers in recorded history was Feodor Vassilyev. He was a peasant from Shuya, Russia. What's up everyone and welcome back to the World History Channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. He had 87 children and died at 76 years old. Additionally, in the 1700s, all of these children were twins, quadruplets. One of the most prolific fathers in recorded history was who holds the record for the most children born to a single woman in the world. He was a peasant from Shuya, Russia, gave birth to 69 of those 1707 to 1782. While his second wife gave birth to 18. During that time, although he had 87 children and died at 76 years old, we do know that a remarkable 82 of the 87 children lived in Moscow on government assistance, and that many of them survived Vassilyev's first wife, who holds the record for the most children born to a single woman in the world. But others find the evidence quite reasonable. Of those children. 69 while kids his second were born gave to his first wife. Although little is known about contribution to the whole arrangement remains we do know that a remarkable 82 of the 87 children lived in Moscow on government assistance. Vassilyev's first wife gave birth to 69 children in 27 births. The story may seem impossible, exceeding the human body's limits in a way that many scientists believe is impossible. 69 kids some of the most physically taxing experiences a woman can go through contribution to the whole arrangement remains mind-boggling did it continuously for 18 years. But he isn't even the most impressive person in the story. That's the same amount of time it takes to raise one child gave birth to 69 children in 27 the world record for having the most children is held by Vassilyev in a way that many scientists believe is impossible. Some of the most physically taxing experiences a woman can go through are pregnancy and childbirth. 82 of Feodor Vassiliev's 87 children survived 18 years. Considering the amount of time it takes to raise one child to maturity, this survival rate is even more impressive. The world record for having the most children every third child in 18th century Sweden died before reaching adulthood. 82 out of 87 children survived, as well as children born into poverty, 82 of Feodor are less likely to live because they are frequently born prematurely. Despite those odds, infant mortality the Vassilyevs managed to produce this survival rate is even more impressive. The story's veracity is questioned in 18th century Sweden. Many people can't quite believe the spectacular fertility claims made about the Vassilyevs, as well as children born into poverty. There is no conclusive evidence to suggest that such a large number of children born prematurely. Despite those odds, that said, it's not entirely impossible. 82 children who survived. Vassilyev spent a total of 18 years being pregnant by many. Even accounting for breaks in between pregnancies to nurse the newly delivered children made about the Vassilyevs. She technically had enough time. There is no conclusive evidence to suggest because such a large number of multiple births is genetically determined and born. It makes sense why she had so many twins and triplets. Impossible. Having said that, a theory is not always spent a total of 18 years being pregnant. Vassilyev's chances of surviving for breaks in between pregnancies to nurse the newly delivered children. Chances of surviving childhood had enough time seems for 27 pregnancies. Because the tendency toward in their own time is genetically determined. It isn't only modern scientists why she had so many twins the concept of one man having said close to 100 is not always true. Those seeking proof in the 18th century of surviving childbirth 27 times. Petersburg, as well as claimed no evidence was needed since the Vassilyev children resided in Moscow and received government assistance. Were doubted in their own time. One could also look at the records kept by the modern scientists who balk at the concept of one man fathering close to 100 children. His second wife had only 18th century asked the Imperial Academy of St. Feodor Vassilyev who claimed no evidence was needed since the Vassilyev children resided in Moscow after fathering 69 of them. But Vassilyev could also look at the records kept by the monastery of Nichols, wife, whose name is also unknown, births in Moscow allegedly gave birth to 18 children. His second wife had only 18 children compared to his first wife's 69 kids. Feodor Vassilyev married a second time. It's a miracle to assume he'd be tired of having kids after fathering 69 today. Dying in childbirth is a rarity in developed nations. His second wife, as of 2015, also unknown, only allegedly gave 100,000 women in the UK died due to pregnancy-related complications compared to his first wife's 69 pregnancy. It doesn't sound developed too bad. Nations boast similar statistics. Misses. By contrast, Vassilyev Sierra Leone, one of the world's poorest dying in childbirth, is a rarity of 1,100 maternal deaths as of 2015 live births. Only 8 of every 100,000 women in the UK died due to pregnancy-related complications. There was no real treatment for problems that could kill you. And certain emergencies like bleeding nations were much more likely when there were multiple births. By contrast, Sierra Leone, one of the 27 pregnancies, carried with them significant risks. So the fact that she survived into her 70s is nothing short of a miracle. Russian women in the 1700s were Russian peasants. There was no real treatment for problems with a lot of mouths to feed, and certain emergencies, while large numbers of children were much more likely when there were multiple work and other types of labor. Vassilyev's 27 pregnancies carried with them significant risks. They needed to be raised. So the fact that she survived into her 70s is nothing short of anything other than work. If the Vassilyevs were serfs, like many peasants were peasants with a lot of mouths to feed. They could appeal to their landowner for help. While large numbers of children helped the agrarian lower class. Science might one day remove limits on female fertility. All those kids still needed to eat. No upper limit they needed to be raised, to how many children which was a difficult task for parents who had as long as someone is willing and able to bear said children. If the Vassilyevs they can keep producing kids like many peasants at the time. They could appeal to their landowner for help when their kids became disobedient. Men produce millions of sperm every day. Science might one day remove while women possess a set number of eggs at birth which continue to degrade as they age. No upper limit exists to how many children often become infertile in their late 40s as long as someone is willing and able to bear said children. Any such cap on their fertility. They can keep producing kids but this might be changing with new advances in reproductive technology. Firstly, assisted reproductive technologies every day are causing a spike in the incidence of set number of eggs at birth which continue to degrade as they age. In 2015, women often become infertile began in their working late 40s and early stem cells found in human ovaries, while men lack any such cap on their fertility. Stimulated. But this might be changing with new advances in reproductive technology. These assisted reproductive technologies are causing a spike in the incidence of twins, reproductive potential, and other multiple technology, which remains theoretical, would likely be used to help women with infertility stem cells found in human ovaries. But it could technically allow one woman to have hundreds of children. These cells could theoretically produce unlimited by far. These eggs could then be harvested and preserved, parents in history, dramatically increasing when the average person considers parents with massive broods. This technology, which remains the Duggar family or would likely be used to help women with infertility issues. While these media sensations birth a lot of kids, but it could technically allow one woman to have hundreds of children, even less on other fertile historical figures. Vassilyev by far, and Mongol Empire's founder, Genghis Khan, only prolific is said to have had over 1,000 children. When the average person considers parents with massive broods, 0.5% of the world's population. Family or Natalie factors can lead to twins. While these media sensations birth a lot of kids, it's more than a little difficult to pinpoint and even less on other Vassilyev and his wives remain so fertile. The warmonger and Mongol Empire's considering the number of factors which come together and make a person more predisposed to having twins, making him the male ancestor of 0.5% of the world's population. Many factors it's also impossible to genetically test from a couple hundred years in the future. It's more than a little difficult to pinpoint. There's no way to determine what contributed to this extremely unusual case. Especially considering the number of factors which come together a Russian peasant from the 18th century who had 87 children of his own factors can range from genetics to diet as startling as that of Feodor. Since it's also impossible to genetically test in the 18th century who reportedly had 87 children confirmed, 69 there's no way to determine what contributed to this extremely unusual case. The fact that almost all of these children were story of Feodor Vassilyev, a Russian peasant from the 18th century who had 87 children of his own few tales in the history of human reproduction are startling as that of while contemporary skeptics question the plausibility of such high fertility, who reportedly had 87 children from the Imperial Academy of St. Petersburg and the monastery of Nikolsk attest to the Vassilyev family's existence. All of these children were noting twins, that 82 of the 87 children survived infancy, defying biological norms and statistical probability, high infant mortality makes this story even more extraordinary. The first Mrs. was a woman while contemporary skeptics question the plausibility of such high fertility of Vassilyev. The true marvel of this story lies not just in Feodor and the monastery of Nikolsk, but in the unimaginable reproductive endurance of his first wife, noting that 82 of the 87 children like many peasant women of the time, a miraculous feat given the era's high infant mortality pregnancies. The first Mrs. was a woman who gave birth of 27 times, 32 children. The superhuman fertility of Vassilyev, the true marvel of this story lies not just in Feodor's prolific fatherhood, but in the unimaginable reproductive endurance to multiple children in nearly every pregnancy, like many peasant women of the time, 69 children in just 27 labors. Over the course of 40 pregnancies, perspective, she was pregnant for approximately 18 pairs of twins, a remarkable physical feat that challenges human biology. 21 children,
really survive
4
27
quadruplets in 16 different sets.
Medical
This indicates
experts
that she
today
gave birth to
debate
multiple
whether such a
children
thing
in
is
nearly
possible.
every pregnancy.
Uterine strain.
Giving birth to 69
human
children in
uterus
just
is not
27
designed
labors.
for continuous
To put
high
this
order
into
multiple
perspective,
births.
she was pregnant
Most
for
women who
approximately
undergo
18
numerous
years.
pregnancies
A
face
remarkable
complications
physical feat
like
that
uterine
challenges
prolapse
human
or
biology.
hemorrhage.
Could a woman
Nutritional
really
demands.
survive 27
Carrying
pregnancies?
twins or triplets requires
Medical
double or
experts
triple the
today
caloric
debate
intake,
whether such a
something
thing is
nearly
possible.
impossible for an
Uterine
18th century
strain.
peasant with
The
limited
human
food
uterus
resources.
is not designed for
Infant
continuous
survival.
high-order multiple
Even
births.
in modern times,
Most women who
premature
undergo
multiples
numerous
face
pregnancies
high mortality
face
complications
rates.
like
It is
uterine
amazing that
prolapse
82
or
of the
hemorrhage.
87 children
Nutritional
survived in a
demands.
time without neonatal
Carrying
care.
twins or triplets
Yet,
requires
historical
double or
accounts
triple the
insist
caloric
the
intake.
family was real,
Something nearly
with many of the
impossible for an
children
18th century
documented as
peasant
living in
with limited
Moscow
food
on government
resources.
assistance.
Infant
Survival.
survival.
Second wife.
Even
An
in modern
18-child
times,
modern
premature
after his first
multiples
wife's
face
death
high
or
mortality
retirement
rates.
from childbirth.
It is amazing
Records
that
are
82
unclear.
of the 87
Feodor married
children
again.
survived in a time without neonatal
His second
care.
wife bore him
Yet,
18 more
historical
children,
accounts
though
insist
details
the
on
family
whether
was
these
real,
were also
with
multiples
many of
are
the
lost to
children
history.
documented as living
Even
in
if these were
Moscow
all
on government
one-time
assistance.
events.
It still
Feodor's
indicates
second wife,
that Feodor had
an
children over the
18-child
course of
modern
5 decades
after his first wife's
demonstrating
death
his
or
remarkable
retirement from
fertility.
childbirth.
How did
Records
this
are
happen?
unclear.
Theories
Feodor
on the
married again.
Vassilyev's extreme fertility.
His second wife bore
One
him 18 more children.
Is hyperovulation
details on
a
whether
genetic
these were also
coincidence?
multiples are
The
lost
most
to history.
plausible explanation
Even if these
is
were
that
all
Mrs.
one-time events.
Vassilyev had a rare genetic
Feodor had
predisposition
children
for
over the course of 5
hyperovulation,
decades,
releasing
demonstrating
multiple
his
eggs per
remarkable
cycle.
fertility.
Some
How
women
did this
simply have a
happen?
higher rate of
Theories
conceiving
on the
twins.
Vassilyev's extreme
This trait
fertility
runs in families.
1,
2. Is
diet
hyperovulation
or
a
environmental
genetic
factors.
coincidence? Some
The most
researchers
plausible
speculate that a high
explanation
dairy
is
or
that Mrs.
phytoestrogen-rich diet,
Vassilyev had a
common
rare
among
genetic
Russian peasants,
predisposition for
could have increased
hyperovulation,
ovulation rates,
releasing multiple
However,
eggs
no
per
other
cycle.
family in history
Some
has come
women
close
simply
to
have a
matching
higher
these
rate
numbers.
of conceiving
3.
twins.
This trait
An
runs
exaggeration
in families.
or a
2.
statistical abnormality.
Diet or
Some
environmental
historians
factors.
contend that the
Some
figures were
researchers
inflated over
speculate
time
that a
due
high
to the
dairy or
absence of comprehensive
phytoestrogen-rich
medical
diet,
records,
common among
Yet,
Russian
the
peasants,
Imperial
could have
Academy's
increased
documentation
ovulation
lends
rates.
credibility
However,
to the claim.
no other family
The
in history
Vassilyevs
has come
versus
close to matching
other
these
prolific
numbers.
parents in
3.
history. While
An
Feodor Vassilyev's
exaggeration
story
or a
seems
statistical
unbelievable,
abnormality,
he
some
isn't the only
historians
figure
contend
associated
that the
with
figures
extreme
were inflated
fertility.
over time due
Genghis
to the
Khan.
absence of comprehensive
DNA
medical
studies
records.
suggest he
Yet,
fathered
the
thousands of
Imperial
children
Academy's
across his empire.
documentation lends
The Duggar
credibility
family,
to the
USA.
claim.
The
19
Vassilyevs
children
versus
by a single
other
birth,
prolific parents
a far cry
in history.
from the Vassilyevs'
While
multiples.
Feodor Vassilyev's
Valentina
story seems
Vassilyeva,
unbelievable.
no relation,
He
but
isn't the
same
only
surname.
figure associated
A
with
Russian
extreme
woman who gave
fertility.
birth to 69
Genghis Khan.
children in the 1700s.
DNA studies
possibly
suggest he fathered
confused with
thousands
Feodor's
of
wife.
children across
Could
his
this
empire.
happen today?
The Duggar family,
The future
USA.
of hyperfertility.
19 children
with modern
by a single
assisted
birth.
reproductive
A
technology.
far cry from
art.
the Vassilyevs'
Women
multiples.
can now conceive litters of
Valentina
babies
Vassilyev,
via IVF.
no relation, but
Octomom
same
Nadia
surname.
Suleiman
A Russian
famously
woman
gave
who
birth
gave
to
birth to
69 children in the 1700s.
Advances in egg freezing
Possibly
and stem cell
confused with
generated
Feodor's wife.
oocytes
Could
could
this
theoretically
happen
allow
today?
a woman to
The
produce
future
hundreds
of
of eggs,
hyperfertility,
surpassing even
with
Mrs.
modern assisted reproductive
Vassilyev's
technology. Art.
Yet,
Even
women
with
can
medical
now conceive
intervention,
litters of
no
babies
woman has
via
come close to
IVF.
69 children.
Octomom Nadia
and likely
Suleiman
never will,
famously gave
given
birth to
ethical and
octuplets
biological
in 2009.
constraints. Advances in
Conclusion.
egg freezing
A
and stem cell
fertility
generated
legend or
oocytes
medical
could
miracle.
theoretically allow
The story
a woman
of
to
Feodor
produce hundreds
Vassilyev
of eggs,
and his unbelievably
surpassing
fertile
even
wives
Mrs.
remains one of
Vassilyev's
history's most
record.
baffling
Yet,
tales.
even with medical
Whether fact or
intervention,
folklore,
no woman has
it
come
forces
close
us
to
to
69
question,
children.
what are the
And
true
likely
limits
never
of
will,
human reproduction?
Given ethical and
Could a
biological
woman really
constraints.
survive 27
Conclusion.
high multiple births
A fertility
in the 1700s?
legend or medical
Why
miracle.
has no other
The
family
story
in
of
recorded
Feodor
history
Vassilyev
matched
and his
this level of
unbelievably
fertility
fertile wives
until
remains
genetic
one of
testing
history's
confirms
most baffling
descendants,
tales.
if any exist?
Whether fact
The
or
Vassilyevs
folklore,
will remain a
it forces
fascinating
us to
outlier
question,
in human biology.
what are the true limits
a family
of
whose
human
reproductive
reproduction?
feats may never
Could a
be
woman
surpassed.
really survive
The story of
27
Feodor
high
Vassilyev,
multiple
a
births
peasant
in the
from
1700s?
Russia?
Why
Born
has
in
no other
1707
family
and
in
recorded
recorded
history
history of
matched
87
this
children,
level of fertility,
22 of whom
until
were twins,
genetic testing
sounds
confirms
so
descendants,
outrageously
if any
improbable
exist.
that it flirts with
The
the line between
Vassilyevs will
folklore
remain a
and documented
fascinating
reality.
outlier in human
Yet,
biology.
the tale of
A
this
family
humble
whose
farmer's
astonishing
feats may never
fertility
be
has endured
surpassed.
for centuries.
The story
and
appears
appears
in historical
Vassilyev,
records
a peasant
as a
from
bizarre
Shia,
but
Russia,
fascinating chapter
born in
of human
1707
reproductive
and
history.
reportedly the father of
Vassiliev's
87
name is
children,
permanently etched
22
into
of whom
discussions
were
of
twins.
biological extremes,
Sounds so
not only because
outrageously
of the sheer
improbable
number of
that it
offspring
flirts
he
with a line line between folklore
but because
and
the majority
documented
of them
reality
came in the form of
Yet,
twins,
the tale of
triplets,
this
and
humble
even
farmer's
quadruplets.
astonishing fertility
What makes
has
this story
endured for
even more
centuries,
jaw-dropping
and
is the
appears
fact
in
that most of
historical
those children
records as a
survived.
bizarre but
An
fascinating
almost
chapter of
inconceivable
human
feat in the
reproductive
18th
history.
century.
Vassilyev's
A time when
name
infant
is
and maternal
permanently etched
mortality
into
were both
discussions of
depressingly
biological
high,
extremes,
and when the idea
not
of a
only
woman
because of the sheer
surviving
number
nearly
of
3
offspring he
decades of
sired,
childbirth,
but because
let
the
alone
majority
dozens
of them
of
came in the
multiple
form of
births,
twins,
sounds more like the plot
and
of a
even
dark
quadruplets.
historical fantasy than
What
a
makes
real-life
this story
event.
even more
In this
jaw-dropping is the
reproductive
fact that
odyssey,
most of those children
Feodor's first
survived,
wife,
whose
an almost
first name has been
inconceivable feat in the
frustratingly
18th
lost to
century,
history,
a time
takes
when
center
infant
stage.
and maternal mortality
During
were
her
both
27
depressingly
separate
high, and when the
pregnancies,
idea of a
she
woman
gave
surviving
birth to an
nearly 3
astounding
decades of
69
childbirth,
children,
let alone
including
dozens of
16
multiple
sets of
births,
twins,
sounds
7
more like
sets
the
of
plot of a
triplets,
dark
and
historical
4
fantasy
sets of
than a real-life
quadruplets.
event.
While
In
Feodor's
this
own
reproductive
contribution
odyssey,
to the situation
Feodor's
is
first
certainly
wife,
remarkable,
whose first name has
biologically
been
and
frustratingly
statistically
lost to
speaking,
history.
it's his wife
Takes
who
center
stands as
stage.
the true
During her
anatomical
27
outlier,
separate
pushing the
pregnancies,
absolute
she
limits
gave
of what a
birth
human
to an
female
astounding
body can
69
endure.
children.
Not only is she
16
listed in the Guinness
sets
World
of
Records
twins,
as the most
7
prolific
sets
mother
of
in
triplets,
documented history,
and 4 sets
but she
of
also
quadruplets.
apparently survived
While
all
Feodor's
27
own
pregnancies
contribution
and
to the
lived into her
situation is
70s.
certainly remarkable.
A miraculous feat in a
Biologically and
period when giving
statistically
birth
speaking,
even once could
it's his
easily
wife
kill
who
a woman,
stands as the true
let alone doing it
anatomical
almost
outlier,
30 times,
pushing the
often
absolute
delivering
limits
2
of
to
what
4
a human
children at
female
once.
body can endure.
The medical
Not only
implications
is
are
she listed in the
staggering,
Guinness World
even
Records
in our
as the most
modern
prolific
age of
mother in
cesarean
documented
sections
history,
and prenatal
but she
care.
also apparently
Such a
survived
feat
all
would be seen
27
as
pregnancies
superhuman,
and lived into
and
her
yet
70s.
somehow
A
this
miraculous
woman
feat
managed
in
to
a
carry
period when
dozens of
giving
children
birth even
determine
once
an
could
era
easily
when
kill a woman,
hemorrhaging,
let
infection,
alone
and
doing it almost
malnutrition
30
were near
times,
constant risks.
often delivering 2
Imagine
to 4
a life
children
in
at
which
once.
this cycle occurred
The
almost
medical
continuously for
implications are
18
staggering.
years.
Every
Even in
time
our
she
modern
stopped
age of
nursing, she was
cesarean
pregnant
sections
again,
and prenatal
and every
care,
time she gave birth,
such a feat
it was
would be
to not
seen
just
as
one but
superhuman.
frequently multiple
And
babies.
yet, somehow,
And the body would
this
be
woman
depleted of
managed to
calcium,
carry dozens
iron,
of children
and other
determine an
essential
era
nutrients.
when hemorrhaging,
That she survived is
infection,
miraculous.
and malnutrition were
That
near
82
constant
out
risks.
of 87 of the
Imagine
children
a
also
life in which
survived
this
is
cycle
equally
occurred
shocking,
almost continuously
especially
for
when we
18
consider
years.
that many of these
Every
children
time
were
she
likely
stopped
born
nursing, she was
prematurely,
pregnant again,
underweight,
and
or in
every
breech
time she gave
positions.
birth,
It
was
was
to not
just
just
one
today
but
would
frequently
necessitate
multiple babies,
hospitalization, but
and the
back
body
then
would
would
be
simply
depleted
dealt
of
with at
calcium,
home or not at
iron,
all.
and other essential
Russian
nutrients.
peasants lived
That
hard
she
lives
survived
in the
is miraculous.
1700s.
That
There was a
82
lot
out
of
of
infant
87
and
of the
maternal
children
mortality,
also survived is
and
equally
most births
shocking,
were attended by
especially when we
midwives or
consider
even
that many of
untrained
these
family
children were
members.
likely born
That
prematurely,
94% of the
underweight, or in
Vassilyev
breech
children
positions.
survived infancy
Conditions
is statistically
statistically
would necessitate
implausible given the medical
hospitalization, but
context
back
of the
then
time.
were simply dealt with
Yet
at home or
records
not
from the
at all.
monastery of Nikolsk,
Russian peasants
as well
lived
as
hard
reports given
lives
to
in
the
the
Imperial
1700s.
Academy of St.
There was a lot of
Petersburg
infant and maternal
assert the
mortality,
veracity of the story,
and most births were
while many
attended by
historians and
midwives or even
scientists today
untrained
raise
family
eyebrows
members.
at the story.
That 94%
Calling it
of the
medically
Vassilyev
suspect or
children
even
survived
biologically
infancy is
implausible.
statistically
No
implausible
evidence has
given the
surfaced
medical
to
context of
conclusively
the time.
disprove it either.
Yet records from the
However, in the
monastery of
face of
Nikolsk,
such outrageous
as well as
claims,
reports given to the Imperial
skepticism is
Academy of
healthy.
St.
The absence of
Petersburg
definitive
assert
names
the
and
veracity
individual
of the
birth
story,
records,
while
which
many
were frequently
historians and
patchy at
scientists
best in
today
rural
raise
18th
eyebrows
century
at the
Russia,
story,
is
one
one
issue
issue
that
that
skeptics
skeptics or
frequently
even
cite.
biologically
Others
implausible.
contend that the
No
narrative
evidence
resembles
has
a tall
surfaced to
tale,
conclusively
a kind of
disprove it
historical
either.
entry for a
However,
freak
in
show
the
that has
face
been
of such
passed down,
outrageous
retold,
claims,
and exaggerated over
skepticism
time.
is healthy.
But there's
The
enough
absence of
documentation
definitive
to give
names
it
and
credibility,
individual birth records,
at least as
which
an
were frequently
anecdotal
patchy
marvel.
at best in
When a
rural
French
18th
Academy
century
member
Russia,
inquired into the
is one
story in
issue that
1782,
skeptics frequently cite.
Russian officials
Others
simply
simply
pointed
pointed
out
out
that the
that the
Vassilyev
resembles a
children
tall
were known
tale,
and present
a
in
kind of
Moscow, and
historical
even
entry
received
for a freak
government
show
rations.
that has been passed
It
down,
is unknown
retold,
whether the
and
imperial
exaggerated
courts
over
or
time.
the undeniable
But there's
evidence
enough
that dozens of
documentation
children
to give
all
it
shared a
credibility,
similar appearance,
at least
and claimed
as
to
an
have the same
anecdotal
father
marvel.
prompted the state
When a
to
French
intervene.
Academy member
As for
inquired
Feodor
into his
himself,
story in 1782,
he lived to the age
Russian
of
officials
76
simply
and
pointed out that
remarried
the
after the
Vassilyev
death of
children
his
were
first
known
wife,
and present in
not to
Moscow,
be
and
outdone.
even received government
His second
rations.
wife gave birth
It
to
is
18
unknown whether
children
the
of her
imperial
imperial
known,
courts,
including
the
6 sets of
undeniable
twins
evidence
and
that
2
dozens
sets
of
of
children
triplets
all shared
this
a similar
brought the total
appearance
number of
and claimed
children
to have
he
the
had
same
with
father
just 2
prompted the
women
state
to
to
87.
intervene.
As
For
for
comparison,
himself,
the average number of
he
children
lived to the
born to a
age of
woman in
76
18th century
and
Europe was
remarried
between
after the
5
death
and
of his
7.
first wife.
And even this
Not
was
to be
considered
outdone,
high by modern
his
standards.
second wife gave
So
birth
how
to
did the
18
Vassilyev
children of her
family
own,
do it?
including
Was it
6
divine
sets of twins
intervention,
and
a
2
genetic
sets of
jackpot,
triplets?
or
This
some
brought the
peculiar
total number
fluke
of
of nature
children
he had with
multiple
just 2
births
women
frequently
to
run in
87.
families
For
and are typically
comparison,
linked to a
the average
genetic
number of children
predisposition
born
on
to
the
a
mother's
woman in
side,
18th century
although
Europe
it is
was between
impossible
5
to say
and
for
7.
sure.
And
Because
even this
Mrs.
was considered
Vassilyev's
high by
family
modern
history is
standards.
completely unknown.
So how did the
We can't know
Vassilyev
whether she
family
had
do
siblings
it?
or a mother
Was it
who
divine
experienced
intervention,
similar
a
multiple
genetic
births,
jackpot,
but it's
or
certainly
some
one of the more
peculiar
reasonable
fluke of
theories.
nature? Another
Multiple
theory
births
considers her
frequently
diet.
run in families,
Studies have
and are
shown that
typically
diets
linked to a
rich in
genetic
yams or dairy can
predisposition
increase
on the
the
mother's
likelihood
side.
of hyperovulation,
Although it is
the
impossible
release
to
of
say for
multiple
sure,
eggs during
because
one
Mrs.
menstrual cycle,
Vassilyev's family
which
history
increases
is
the
completely
chance
unknown.
of fraternal twins
We
or
can't
higher
know
order
whether she had
multiples.
siblings or a
Given
mother
the
who
peasant diet of
experienced similar
18th
multiple
century
births.
Russia,
But
which
it's
was rich
certainly
in
one of the more
fermented dairy
reasonable
products and
theories.
grains.
Another
It's
theory
not out of the
considers her
question
diet.
that this may have played a
Studies
role.
have shown that
Though
diets
this theory
rich in
is highly
yams or dairy
speculative,
can increase the
others
likelihood of
suggest that
hyperovulation.
environmental
The
or
release of
hormonal
multiple
factors
eggs
played a
during one
role.
menstrual cycle,
Again, we can
which
only
increases the
speculate.
chance of fraternal
No
twins
woman
or
in
higher
recorded
order
history,
multiples.
including
Given
the
modern
peasant
women
diet assisted
assisted
by
century
IVF
Russia,
or other
which
assisted
was rich in
reproductive
fermented dairy
technologies,
products and grains,
has ever given
it's not
birth
out
to
of the
as many
question
children
that
as
this may have
Mrs.
played a role.
Vassilyev. Though
But
this
it's not
theory is
just the
highly
science
speculative.
that makes this story so
Others
fascinating.
suggest that
It's the
environmental
sheer
or
logistical
hormonal
nightmare
factors
of
played a
raising
role.
that many children.
Again, we can only
Feodor
speculate.
and his wives were
No
peasants,
woman in recorded
meaning
history,
they likely had little
including
to no
modern
formal
women
education,
assisted by
limited
IVF or
access
other
to
assisted
healthcare,
reproductive
and lived
technologies.
off the land.
So
Has
how
ever
do you
given
raise
birth to
nearly
as many
90
children without going
Vassilyev?
absolutely
But it's
insane
not
or
just
letting
the
half of
science
them
that makes
starve?
this story so
The answer may be
fascinating.
found in the
It's the
communal
sheer
way of life of
logistical
Russian
nightmare
peasants
of
in the
raising
18th
that many
century.
children.
When extended
Feodor and his
families
wives
often
were
lived
peasants,
together, and older
meaning
children
they
were
likely had
expected to
little
help
to no
take care of
formal
their younger
education.
siblings. Limited
The
access
Vassilyev
to
family
healthcare
probably
and lived
functioned
off the
more
land.
like an independent
So how do you
village
raise
than a
nearly
typical
90
nuclear
children
family?
without going
Older
absolutely
children
insane
helped
or
harvest
letting
crops,
half of them
raise
starve?
animals,
The answer may be
meals,
found in the
and
communal
care for
way of
toddlers
life
and
of Russian
infants.
peasants in the 18th
Education,
century.
if it happened at all,
When extended
would have been
families often
informal,
lived together,
passed
and older
down through
children
oral
were expected to
traditions
help
or
take
church
care of their
instruction.
younger siblings.
It's also plausible that
Vassilyev
not all of
family
the children
probably
lived
functioned
under one
more
roof
like
at
an
once.
independent village
Some may
than
have
a
moved
typical
in with
nuclear
relatives,
family.
married young,
Older
or
children
been
helped
apprenticed
harvest
out to other
crops,
families
raise
or
animals,
trades.
cook meals,
Support from the
and care
government
for
is
toddlers
another
and
consideration.
Education,
According
if it
to
happened at
historical
all,
accounts,
would have been
the
informal,
Vassilyev family
passed
received
down
housing
through oral
or food
traditions
rations
or
from
church
the Russian
instruction.
government because
It's
of their
also
incredible
plausible that not
fertility.
all of the children
If
lived
true,
under one
this
roof
would
at
make
once.
the Vassilyev children
Some may have
early
moved in with
beneficiaries of
relatives,
state welfare,
married young,
or been
possibly one of the
apprenticed out
first
to other
documented
families or
cases of a
trades.
government stepping in to
Support
assist
from the
an
government
unusually
is
large
another
family for reasons of
consideration.
national interest,
According to historical
curiosity,
accounts,
or even pride.
the Vassilyev
The
family
tale is so
received housing
extraordinary
or
that it
food
seems more
rations from the
suited to
Russian
folklore
government
or
because
ancient
of their
mythology
incredible
than factual
fertility.
biography.
If true,
And yet it
this
has
would make
managed
the
to persist
Vassilyev
through
children
centuries
early
as one of the most
beneficiaries of
bizarre
state
and
welfare,
mind-boggling records
possibly
in the
one of the
history of
first
human
documented
reproduction.
cases of a government
While stories
stepping in
like
to
Genghis
assist an
Khan's
unusually
legendary
large family
thousand-plus
for
children
reasons of
or King
national
Solomon's
interest,
rumored hundreds of
curiosity,
offspring
or even
dominate
pride.
tales of prolific
The tale is
patriarchs.
so
They
extraordinary
lack
that
the
it seems
documented
more
structure
suited to
of the
folklore
Vassilyev
or
narrative,
ancient mythology
which
than
reads
factual
less like
biography,
legend and more like
and
a
yet it has
jaw-dropping
managed to
bureaucratic
persist through
anomaly,
centuries as
a
one of the
rare
most
moment
bizarre
when
and
paperwork,
mind-boggling
monastery
records
records,
in the history
and
of human
scientific
reproduction.
curiosity
While
aligned
stories like
just
Genghis
enough to
Khan's
preserve
legendary
something truly
thousand-plus children or
unbelievable.
King Solomon's
And if you're
rumored
wondering
hundreds of
whether
offspring
such
dominate
reproductive
tales of
feats
prolific
might ever be
patriarchs,
replicated,
they lack the
modern
documented
science
structure
may
of the
make that
Vassilyev
possibility
narrative,
more real
which
than you'd
reads
think.
less like legend
Thanks
and
to
more like
assisted
jaw-dropping
reproductive
technologies
technologies
like
like
IVF,
a rare
egg
moment when
harvesting,
paperwork,
and artificial
monastery
insemination,
records, and
the rate
scientific
of multiple
curiosity
births has been
aligned
increasing
just
in
enough
modern
to
times.
preserve something
Between
truly
1980 and
unbelievable.
2009,
And if you're wondering
twin
whether
birth
such
rate in the
reproductive
US rose
feats
by
might
more
ever
than
be
75%,
replicated, modern
mostly due
science
to
may
these
make that
advancements.
possibility more
But even
real than
today,
you'd think.
the idea of giving
Thanks to
birth to
assisted
69 or more
reproductive
children is
technologies
almost
like
entirely
IVF,
out of the realm
egg
of plausibility,
harvesting, and artificial
unless, of course,
insemination.
the laws of
The rate
nature
of
are
multiple
bent or
births
entirely
has been
rewritten
increasing
by
in modern
genetic
times.
engineering and artificial
Between
wombs.
1980 and 2009,
In fact, in 2015,
the twin birth rate
scientists
in the US
began
rose by
exploring
more
the
than
concept of
75%,
oocyte stem cells,
mostly due to these
stem
advancements.
cells and ovaries that can
But even
theoretically
today,
produce
the
new
idea
eggs,
of giving birth to
potentially
69
giving
or more
women the
children is
ability to
almost
generate
entirely
eggs
out of
throughout
the
their
realm of
lives rather than
plausibility.
being limited by
Unless,
their
of
natural
course,
reserve.
the laws of nature are bent or entirely rewritten by genetic engineering and artificial wombs. In fact, in 2015, scientists began exploring the concept of oocyte stem cells in ovaries that can theoretically produce new eggs, potentially giving women the ability to generate eggs throughout their lives rather than being limited by their natural reserve.